All right, well, this week I wanted to do a special edition because, Olympic spirit is in the air. But if you really want to partake in that directly, you got to go to Paris. Here at Into the Dust, we are going to celebrate this Olympic moment by going way back to the past, back where it all began, to ancient Greece. Now, if you recall, modern-day Greece hosted the Games in 2004, not that long ago, and it was pretty much a smashing success, with some archaeological shout-outs to our friends the Minoans, including the snake goddess who we visited at Knossos, but the preparations were a little touch and go.
This isn't done. These two roof pieces aren't done. Yeah. This isn't done either.
Now, those games marked 108 years since the start of the modern Olympics, which were first held in Athens in 1896. And in fact, you can visit the stadium where they were held if you go there today. However, we're even going to go way back before that, to the site of the original games, which were held for more than 1,000 years, from 776 BC to 393 AD. And for this, we're traveling all the way to the western edge of the Peloponnesian Peninsula to the archaeological site of ancient Olympia. Now, we talked about the Peloponnese before in our episode about ancient Mycenae, which is on the eastern edge of the Peloponnesian Peninsula. Now we're on the western edge. So this is where it all began. But why did it begin here? Well, at ancient Olympia, there was a big temple dedicated to the god Zeus. Zeus was the father god of the other 12 gods of Mount Olympus. Now that's Mount Olympus, not Olympia. Mount Olympus is in the northern part of the country, totally different area. So why was there a temple to him down here in the south? Well, perhaps those gods got lonely up there all alone on the mountain?
It's so lonely at the top of Olympus.
But anyway, major building seems to have begun at the site at around 1000 BC. And that's actually before the period we know as ancient Greece, Greek antiquity. This was in a period called the geometric period, based on the kind of designs they had on their pottery. And proof of this has been found recently. Just a couple years ago, they found this tiny little bull, this statue, which was probably a votive offering as part of a sacrificial ceremony. So in all likelihood, the whole ancient Greek religion, particularly at this spot where we honor Zeus, was evolved from some earlier tradition. And this, in fact, is true of the religions we know today. Hence, the feast to the pagan goddess Estra becomes Easter. Saturnalia, in honor of the god Saturn, becomes Christmas. You get the idea. So in the 8th century BC, this area in ancient Olympia was known as Altis, sacred grove of the god Zeus. And it was one of many such sanctuaries around the Greek world, sanctuaries to the gods, including others to Zeus. But for whatever reason, they decided to hold the games here every 4 years in honor of the head honcho himself, Zeus. And folks, I am not the keeper of knowledge on this stuff. This is what I learned from visiting the site, doing some reading up on my own. So if you have any idea why this particular site was chosen for the games, please feel free to add them in the comments below. Now, of course, it wasn't exactly the same back in the day. First, the athletes competed in the nude back then, and I'm not sure how well nude wrestling would go down on TV today. They also didn't win a gold medal or a cereal sponsorship. They got instead just a crown of olive leaves. But just like today, the winners often became celebrities. There was 6-time wrestling champ Milo of Croton. There was runner Leonidas of Rhodes, whose record 12 wins was not broken until 2016 by swimmer Michael Phelps. And there was boxing champ Melanchomus of Caria, who could supposedly knock out his opponents without ever even getting hit. And pretty soon, this thing became a sensation. Already by the year 684 BC, they had to extend it from 1 day to 3. And soon at its peak, they were having crowds of 50,000 people, competitors and spectators. Considering how much smaller the population was back then, that's a pretty impressive crowd. Now remember, this was all in the honor of the god Zeus. So believe it or not, the main festivities were not necessarily the games, but instead a huge sacrifice of up to 100 oxen. And it was reported that by 200 AD, this sacrifice, which was accompanied, of course, by burning the oxen, created an ash heap that was more than 6 meters or 20 feet high. Now, there have been some killer open ceremonies, but 100 oxen, not literally that killer. This was not exactly made for the modern audience. Now, city-states from all over the Greek world sent athletes, but contrary to popular belief, those city-states did not cease their warfare during the Games. There was an Olympic truce which guaranteed spectators, participants in the Games, safe passage to travel through all the Greek lands unhindered. And of course, the site of the Olympics itself would not be subject to invasion during the Games. And I believe from all of ancient history, there's only been one instance that was reported where this was actually interfered with and violated. So the Olympic truce did hold. But for this reason, the Olympic Games came to symbolize peace. And once they were restarted in 1896, they were held every 4 years, just like in the old days, until, of course, the Winter Olympics and the Summer Olympics split in 1992, Barcelona, and 1994, Lillehammer, the Winter Olympics. So up until then, it was always every 4 years. Now it's every 2 years. But of course, each kind of Olympics, winter is 4 years apart from other winter, summer is 4 years apart from other summer. Now, in order to accommodate the growing number of visitors as the profile of the Games increased, the site kept getting more and more elaborate. At its core was the Temple of Zeus, where a giant marble and gold statue of the god stood, or actually sat, at a height of more than 41 feet or over 12 meters. This thing was so amazing, it was named as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and drop some of the others in the comment section if you know them. That statue was put in by the sculptor Phidias around the year 435 BC, and fun fact, in the 1950s, excavations found a sculptor's workshop not far from the temple, which is said to be that of Phidias, although I'm not quite sure how that's proven. I'm not sure that they found any writing to that extent, but it's a nice story. So over time, more and more religious structures were built, temples, treasuries, altars, to the point where, according to the Greek traveler Pausanias, by the 2nd century, there were over 70 of them on site. Add to that the growing number of accommodations like gymnasiums, baths, and hostels, and you've got yourself the very first Olympic village. And in fact, you can still see a lot of this today. Among the temples, there's the one to Zeus, where that giant statue used to sit, and there's one to his wife Hera. You can see the Palaestra, where wrestling was taught, and one of my favorites, the Philapion, a small shrine which was built by Philip of Macedon to celebrate one of his victories, and inside were statues of his family, including his famous son, Alexander the Great. You can also visit the place where, till this day, the Olympic torch is lit for every game, and that's not far from this spot in the picture. Of course, one of the highlights is the ancient stadium, and to enter into that, you actually get to walk through the original archwayed entranceway. And believe it or not, this was where, and to enter into that, you actually get to walk through the original archwayed entranceway. And believe it or not, this was where the shot put competition was held in those 2004 Olympic Games. Now, because all of this lasted more than 1,000 years, it endured well into Roman times. In fact, even the Games by a year so he could participate. Maybe he had to practice or maybe he was busy. Now, not surprisingly, as the emperor, he won every single competition he entered, including the chariot race, which he didn't even finish. But he died shortly thereafter the next year, and his name was stripped off of the winners' rolls. I see some similarity with today, too, as we let the president throw out that first pitch in some baseball games, and the ball usually doesn't even make it to the plate. Although W was one exception. Anyway, though, as we know, the Roman Empire became Christian under Constantine the Great, and thereafter the church authorities became more and more fanatical until Emperor Theodosius I canceled all pagan ceremonies, including the games, in 393 AD. And to make matters worse, the Temple of Zeus was apparently destroyed around 426 AD, when another emperor, Theodosius II, began aggressively persecuting pagans. When the exact site was rediscovered by English antiquarian Richard Chandler in 1766, it was said to be covered by 8 meters or 26 feet of silt. Now, because this silt had seashells in it, it was hypothesized that there had been repeated tsunamis which brought seawater and other debris flooding into the river valley, and that's what covered up the site. The French led the first excavations in 1829, and those continued throughout the 19th and 20th centuries until even today, which is why they found that little bull votive offering that we talked about just before. Now, visiting there is a great experience. There's so much to see, and it's pretty well preserved thanks to being buried, ironically, by all that silt, that you would need at least half a day there. These are not your typical disappointing ruins. In fact, I'm not even going to go all broken record on you and say that you need to join a tour or hire a guide. The very helpful site map, signage, and the great little museum will give you the basics of what you need to know in order to understand what it is that you're looking at. And part of that half day would definitely be spent in that small but excellent museum, where you can see pediment statues from some of the temples on site that are better preserved than the Parthenon marbles, which of course are in the British Museum, but let's not get into that right now. And included in the galleries is some cool ancient Olympic paraphernalia that you won't want to miss. Now, one of the things you will miss at ancient Olympia are those Parthenon-level crowds. Why? Well, it's about a 3.5-hour drive from Athens, so it receives a lot fewer tourists. For example, in July 2022, that would be peak tourist season, it received fewer than 50,000 visitors, about on par with ancient Mycenae, but 90% fewer than the Acropolis at Athens, which is a more compact site than Olympia. And in fact, from what I could tell, most of the visitors were day trippers from cruise ships that can dock at Katakolo or Kyllini, which are about a 30 to 60-minute drive away on the coast. And for this reason, there seemed to be surprisingly little accommodation nearby, which made this much less of a tacky, touristy kind of situation than I've experienced in other major destinations in Greece. In fact, most of the local businesses and restaurants actually catered to a local clientele. And like I've said before, my travel hack for Greece, go in the winter. The weather will probably be just fine, and you'll likely have the sights all to yourself. Just check out these photos. Blue skies, no crowds. And unlike a lot of the sites in Western Europe or the United States, they actually make the entry fees reasonable. 12 euros for an adult in the high season, 6 in the off season. So do yourself a favor when you're in Greece. Rent a car or hop a bus tour on over to the archaeological site of ancient Olympia to soak up that Olympic spirit. It's probably, unfortunately, not too much of an exaggeration to say that that won't cost you much more than a cup of coffee and a hot dog at the modern-day Olympics. Hey, if you like what you heard, give me that thumbs up below, hit that bell to subscribe, or if you want to support more independent archaeology content, consider contributing to my Patreon, where you can enjoy some exclusive members-only benefits and other goodies. Until the next dig.